You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Dissecting the Red Carpet. So in this series, we take a look at red carpet dresses and we try to remake them. This is the part 2 of this video. If you have not seen the part 1, please make sure you go and see that in order to fully understand what is going on here. So one more thing before we start the video. If you're a beginner and you are having issues with learning, or if you are a person that's a bit advanced but you want to try to clean up your sewing, I have courses that would help you out, long-term courses for 3 months, 6 months, and for 1 year. So if you're interested in that, please contact me with the number that you can see on this screen. Also, so that you fully understand what how we will go about this, I'm going to give away 2 days of free videos so that you see the online way of learning is the best for you. So I will see you guys next week. Please subscribe for more quality content. Bye. Alright, as you can see, this is where I ironed, and I've ironed both sides flat. This is where I backstitched because I was trying to lock it there. I will loosen from the top all the way down to where I backstitched. So that's what you can see me doing here. When you're done with that, the next step is to fix the zipper. So I have ironed and loosened the seam. So this is the reason why I locked it first. When you're trying to fix the zipper, you're going to keep it like this, because at the end of the day, this is how it's supposed to be. You see this? I'll flip it over. After I flip it over, you want your stitches to land on that line there, the line where that iron, the line that the iron has marked out for us. Okay, now I'm going to place the zipper, and I'm keeping 1/2 inch allowance, because the 1/2 inch at the top is the allowance I use to turn my lining. So I'm keeping that metal stopper after 1/2 inch. So I'll stitch from there all the way down to the bottom. When you've locked that place in place, you will lock it all the way back up, and then continue from where you locked and stitch all the way down to the bottom. When you get to the bottom, make sure you back stitch it at the down part. You know, if I flip it over like this, you will see that my seam landed on that line, or that ironing line that we had after we loosened. So it's time to stitch the other side. So I'll flip it, make sure that front is facing front. You see, we should keep it at the same level. Flip it over. We're going to lock it in place. When you lock the top part first, it ensures that the top side, one side of your zip, is no longer than the other. So I'm going to lock the top part in place. By doing that, I would ensure that the top side, one side of the zip, is no longer than the other. I'm going to come back to the down part, and I'll stitch from there, from the bottom all the way to the top. Okay, that's what you can see me doing here. Okay, so when you have fixed the zipper, we're simply going to turn it to the other side. So as you can see, this is what we have. We've fixed the zipper. You take it to your ironing table and you press and iron it flat. So at this point, you've seen I've ironed everything flat. This is the other side of the zipper. I'm going to fix my lining. Remember, I told you guys, the same thing you do to your fabric is the same thing you will do to your lining. So as you can see here, the lining has been darted, and the same thing I did to the zip space on the fabric, the same thing I've done on the lining. So now I'm going to zip down. After you zipped it all the way down, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to place it. So this is how I want it to be at the end of the day. Okay, I want the lining to turn the zipper in, so I place it exactly the same. Okay, you place it the same, hold it in place, flip it over like I'm doing here. You see that? And then I'm going to flip everything over. So now if you see, if you are following along, you would see that we have the line where we stitched before showing. Okay, so here you align the fabric and the lining, and then you want to land on the stitch, the exact stitch that you had before. I'm going to sew from there all the way down. So as you can see, my needle is landing on that line. Okay, it's landing on that line all the way down. When you are stitching, when you get to 1/2 inch before where that back stitch stop, you stop at that point. See, the lining has turned the zipper to the inside. I'm going to repeat the same thing for the other side. So take my lining, cover it, okay, make sure that the lining, fabric and the lining are on the same level, turn it over to the inside, and then we'll stitch on the old seam that you can see. Basically the same thing what I did to the other side. So I stitch from inside here and I stitch from inside here, and you can see the result. That's what you're supposed to have. That's how your zipper allowance is supposed to look on the inside, and this is how the outside should look. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the top. So we have half an inch that we kept when we're placing the zip. We'll flip it over like this, and we'll sew that half an inch from top all the way down to the bottom. Remember when you're fixing your zipper, you see, look at it there. By the time I turn it inside out, you'll see that the top part isn't rough anymore. We'll repeat the exact same thing on the other side. So here you see we have the three sides of the front. The center piece, these are the side pieces. What I'm going to do is I'm going to join them together, but before I join them, you're going to iron it on. Now this is fusible fleece interfacing, okay, so binding it to the center piece. When you want to cut the interfacing, what you would do is you're going to cut it from the top and let it stop at the underbust round, okay, but all the sides around it are exactly the same. So the fusible fleece should cover from the top part all the way to the underbust length, okay. So make sure you get the interfacing that has the heat activated glue on one side, okay. So we're going to iron it on, okay. So make sure you iron it on, and then we'll join it together. After you've padded it, look at where it stopped. It stopped at the underbust round. The next thing would be to join them together, just like I've joined the other side. So align them like so. You stitch from the bottom all the way to the top. Remember to back stitch it at the top. So make sure that it's on the same level all around, and I'm going to stitch from top to bottom. Now make sure you lock it. As you can see here, after I've stitched it, this is what we have. So you see it has a bust, okay. I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to push all the excess to one side, and then we'll stitch from top to bottom, okay. Now remember, the front of this piece is draped, so the lining has to have foam. That is why you see I've gone ahead to make the lining to be padded and to have the foam, since the top part is draped. So when you're done with doing that, I want you to hem the lining, okay. You're going to hem the lining. Make sure you hem the back of the lining too. So what you have here is the back and the front. As you can see, I have hemmed the bottom part like I said I would. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on the front. So as you can see, we have built the lining. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to need to build the drip part. So if you remember the pattern that we used for the back, now if you remember, we had the back and the front, they were very alike. They just had some differences, especially at that top part where we came up, and then the darts that we have. Now the drape part doesn't have a dart, it's basically just the bodies. So we're going to need to make cutouts and then form our drapes. The lining will be solid and the fabric would be draped over it. So this is the back that we have here. This is the pattern for the back. I've folded in my zipper allowance. By the time we do that, this is basically the same thing as the front if you fold in that zipper allowance. Now remember, we lifted the pattern of the front because of I wanted it to be a bit modest. So now you need to align the bust line. So as you can see, that green bust line is aligned with the other bust line under, and there's 1.5 difference at the top. So I'm going to need to increase that top part there by 1.5, okay, so that it would align with what we did on the lining. So now the next step is to cut is to slash our pattern open, okay, to create that draped pleat like ruffles that was done in front of the dress. So the pleat runs from the top part all the way to the half cut line. That's the line that I was pointing out a minute ago. So from the top here, we're going to come to 3 inches, and we're going to make a mark at 3 inches. Then we're going to come to 6 inches, make a mark there, make a mark at 9 inches. Okay, so now the next thing is just to simply draw straight lines from here all the way down. Repeat the same thing at the underbust round and do the same thing again at the half cut. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to cut into the green lines that I just ruled. I'm cutting, but I'm not going to cut all the way down. If you notice, when I get close to the end, I did not chop it off. There's like a 0.2 inch piece of paper holding it together. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to spread it open. Okay, so we've slashed it, now it's time to spread it. So you tilt it backward a little bit. You're going to need paper tape. What you want to do is you're going to need to spread it open accordingly. So the first one here, we'll spread it to 3 inches, and I'm going to tape it down while it's still open. The second side, I'm going to make it 2.5 because I want this side to be slightly smaller than the first one that was made. Okay, so here is opened up to 2.5. Then you also tape that down too to make sure that it stays open. Come to the bottom part, you're going to make a mark here at 2 inches. So this is not as full as the one that we have at the very top, so we tape that down. Now onto the next step, we're going to need to pin this onto the fabric. Now for the next step, this is the fabric that I have here. You'll come from the edge of the fabric. So this is the edge of the fabric, is going all the way down. I want to mark 16 inches from the edge. Okay, from this edge here, mark 16. We're going to do this from top to the bottom, so I'm simply going to mark 16. As you guys can see, I'm marking 16 continuously until I get to the very end of my fabric. My table is a bit small, that's why I need to go through all of this, but if you have a big table, this will not be an issue. Then the next thing you want to do is you want to rule a line and connect all the dots that you have just marked. All those dots of 16, 16, 16, I want you to rule a line joining all the dots together. When you're done with marking it, the next thing we're going to need is the pattern. Remember, the zipper allowance is folded in and the hem is still folded in. So now I'm going to pin it from the bottom to the top. Make sure you keep a space of 4 inches at the bottom. So as you can see, I'm pinning it down, but I kept 4 inches at the bottom here. Okay, so that's 4 inches we have there. We'll need to do something there later on. All right, so now as you can see, I'm using my pin to secure my pattern onto my fabric. Make sure your fabric is smooth. Okay, and also when we're done with this, we need to secure the top part. As you can see, I have pinned this part down. The next thing we're going to do now, please notice where I've pinned it from. That pink line is the border where I'm placing the front part of the pattern. Now if you notice, when I lay down the top part that I've cut and spread, you notice it's not laying on that straight pink line anymore. It's now doing its thing, it's curving to the side. So we'll pin them. We'll simply just pin this part down too before we continue. So as you can see, I have pinned down my patterns here. I've pinned it down to the fabric. So you see that straight line that I drew is going straight up. It's not following the part that we slashed. So we're going to need to make a mark, just like how the skirt part has the mark in front. I'm simply making a mark. As you guys can see, I've zoomed in a bit. I'm making a mark all the way until it meets the first pink line that was going on. I simply just made a line here and it has met the first line. Now we're done with that shape. Now the next thing we're going to do, if you remember, we checked to see how high the front was and we had 1.5, so we have to increase the height by 1.5. So I've first drawn a line to make a mark at the top part of the tube. So I'm going to come to the top part and I'm going to make a mark at 1.5. So I'm placing 1.5 on that line, on the edge of the line, and I've made a mark there. Come to the center piece where you have the dot line, make a mark at 1.5 there too. With that done, I'm going to draw a straight line from that part straight up, raise it up to where 1.5 is, connect all the dots that you have. So I connect the first 1.5 to the 1.5 that's at the center and then back to the armhole. Okay, now that we are done with that, the next thing we have to do is we're going to have to create that pleats, the drapes and the ruffles that you can see in front. That's the next thing. But before we do that, before we do that, we're going to have to add that 16. Now, if you guys remember, I drew a line 16 around the border. You're going to need to give this part to its own 16, because if you notice, it has curved to one side. So that 1.5 that we just raised up, we're going to come there, make a mark at 16 there. We'll draw a straight line from that 16 there, that point there. We're going to draw a straight line from that point to, okay, from here to here, from the new 16 to that 1.5 lift. We've connected them together. So we have 16 there. We're going to adjust, give the second side to 16. The second block will have its own 16, and then we'll drag down the bodies, adjust. If I had more room on my table, I wouldn't need to adjust so much. Okay, we're going to come here to make a mark at 16 and connect all the points that we have. So I've connected all the 16s. That's the curved 16. I've connected everything. So trying to align everything and arrange it. But thank God that we pinned it. If not, this would have been a catastrophe. Now you see that hip line, okay? That line there is the hip line. If I lift it up here, you can see that is the hip line there. You're going to come to the hip line and you're going to make a mark at 8 inches. So the hip line, I'm making the mark at 8 inches at the hip line. And then at the hem, I'm going to make a mark at 6 inches. Okay, the next thing, we're going to connect the point. We're connecting this 6 inches to the 8 inches. Okay, connect 6 to 8 and then adjust everything, and then we're going to connect this 8 to that curved 16. Remember that curve, that 16 inches that we placed in front of the part that is now curved. We're simply going to connect a line from that 16 to the 8. So we're done with creating the pattern. The next step is to cut it out. So how do we cut it out? Oh yeah, at the bottom part there, it is not straight. We're going to need to start from there. So now I'm drawing a line to mark where the original hem is. I'm coming to this side here. You see this side? I'm going to come here and I'm making a mark at 2 inches. Okay, I've made the mark at 2 inches, and at the front where that 6 is, you see where the 6 stops. Okay, I'm making this part here to be longer by to be 4 inches long, sorry. So now we're going to connect that 4 all the way to the 2. So that's what I'm doing now. When you're done with that, it's time to cut it out. Okay, so we're coming from here. We're going to keep that end exactly the same. Okay, so I adjust it, but you notice that I'm cutting that side the same because we didn't add anything there. Here we'll curve from, if you remember, at that side we came from the armhole and we open it up to 1.5, and then there's a 16 in front of the 1.5, so that's where I'm cutting. I'm cutting all the way to that 16. When I get to the 16, I'm following the other curves. Remember, each of those sides that we slashed and we expanded had 16s in front of them. So I'm coming from the 16 around the curve, tapering down to the 8 and then to the 6. Next step is to come to the hem. We're going to cut the 2 all the way out to the 4. A lot of numbers, but you didn't expect it to be easy. It's a Valentino dress. I don't think they expected it to be easy. Sorry, a Versace dress. I don't know why I keep on saying Valentino. The next step is to unpin everything. So all the pins that I used to hold on my pattern paper, I'm going to take them out so that it does not poke my sister, because it's my sister that tried on the dress for me, that I made the dress for. Now this is the pattern that we have. Everything looks a bit crazy and the shape looks crazy, but it soon start coming together. Now the lining that is constructed, the part that has the form, we're going to take the lining, come to the front of the dress. Sorry, I marked in front of the dress, but yeah, come to the front side of the dress. Come to the top part. You see this part here? Around the top part of the tube, I'm going to stitch from the armhole. Okay, I'm going to stitch all the way to my bust, to the other dart point. Okay, you will see what I'm talking about. You can see here I stitched from here. Okay, as you can see, they've been binded together. I stopped at the dart. Okay, So you flip it over, like so. See this line here, this is my hip line, that's the curved area. If you notice, this side also has that curve too, because that was the side that was staying close to the curve. Now you're going to run a stitch from the top all the way down to the bottom. Okay, so we're locking everything. Remember, at the top part, at the very top, I stitched from one side, trust the first dart. My stitch stopped at the second dart, okay, when I was joining my drape to the tube. Okay, now back to the side, I have stitched this side together. So as you can see, we're going to flip it over to the top. That part is a bit rough. I want to iron it so that it lays a bit smoothly, and so that it doesn't interfere with the drapes that we'll do later on. The next step is I'm going to need to pin this in place. So we're going to come to the bottom place. Now at the very hem, we are very sure that the hem doesn't have any drapes. Okay, the hem doesn't have any drape. So we're going to first of all pin it down. Okay, this side doesn't have any drape. We'll lay it flat, completely smooth. So no matter what you do, you know where the drapes are. So we're going to come to the hip too. The hip doesn't have a lot of drapes too, only when she's in motion. So but there are really no ruffles around there. So we're going to lay everything flat around the hip too. Now please don't get too confused. We're adding another drape on the other side that would meet this first drape at the center and will create that ruffle that you can see on the side. But before we get to that, we're going to need to secure this side in place, which is what I'm doing now. Okay, so now we're sure that the hip area and the hem is safe. As you can see, after we've pinned that, all the excess has come to the top, and that pin that we installed there will not allow the ruffles to go lower than it is supposed to. So the first thing is we're going to come to the top and try to arrange all the drapes. Okay, so the first drape falls around the bust point. As you can see, that's the bust point I just picked up. So the first thing, we're going to come to the bust part and we're going to make a drape there. So it's like making little pleats. So I make a pleat there and I pinned it. The next thing you're going to do, right at the under bust, okay, you can feel where the slope stops. That's the under bust area. You're going to need to make another drape at this point. Basically, just look at whatever you're trying to represent and then trying to remake, and then make sure that what you're doing is has a visual relationship with what you're trying to achieve. So at the bottom part, okay, this one is supposed to be facing up. So around the half cut area, I'm making a drape to come close to the drape that we have already. So use the image that you're working with when you're arranging this drape so that you try to stay true to the design that you are working on. So mind you, I'm not pinning, my pin is not touching the lining, okay? I'm only pinning just the satin. All right, in case you were wondering, this is bridal satin. So now the other side that's coming from the side, now we are done with pinning this side together. Now we'll focus on the drape that's supposed to come from the other side. So as you guys have seen, there are drapes coming from both sides. In the picture, there are drapes coming from both sides. So it's time for the other side. We have done the first side. Now to do that, we're going to need the pattern that we used in the very first place. Here we have the pattern that was used before. We're going to need to reconstruct it. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the paper tape and install a new one. So I've taken out the paper tapes and I've ironed it. It has been smoothened. All the tapes are off. Now I'm going to need to rearrange everything and bind it again. Now as for the pattern that's coming from the other side, it's going to come from the other side and it's going to come to the midpoint. Now that line there is the midpoint. That place here where I marked the dot. So I'll first of all secure all the first cuts, though we'll still need to cut the again, but just so that you guys see what's going on, I'm going to make sure that the pattern is exactly how it was the first time, but we'll still need to cut it open. So I've secured everything. When you're cutting for the second side, you're going to come to the dot line, that line that we have here. When we're drafting the center of the back dot, we're going to transfer that line from the bottom all the way to the top. You see that? Which what I have done. I'm going to now, next step is you're going to need to cut it open, which is what I'm doing here. So I'm using my scissors, I'm cutting at that green line. That's the bust line from the bottom all the way to the top. when you're coming from the other direction, okay, now it's time to turn it around. I'm making a cut, and it's still the same thing I did before. I'm not going to cut it all the way down to the end. It's simply just the same lines that I cut before. Now when we're cutting, we're not cutting all the way to the end. It's basically the same thing we did before. Now the same thing would be to place the fabric. So basically the same thing that has to do with the spreading. It's the same thing I did before, only that it's shorter, so it's not as exaggerated as the first part that I did, but it's exactly the same thing that I did when I was spreading those blocks. Okay, so still doing the same thing. I'm going to pin it onto my bridal satin, leaving at least 4 inches of excess at the bottom. So everything has been pinned down, so I'm drawing a straight line in front of the skirt part. Adjust. I'm going to draw a curved line around those points that I slashed and spread. Okay, it's still the same thing. The lifts of 1.5 is still going to be recognized here, so we're going to lift this part here by 1.5 and draw a curve from there. Draw a curve from there to the armhole. Okay, so that's the main line we have here. Here stays exactly the same. The shape stays exactly the same at this point. The side will stay exactly the same at that point. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to keep 10 inches in front of the pattern. On the other side, we kept 16. Here we're keeping only 10 inches. So I'm marking 10 inches everywhere from that 1.5 everywhere to the bottom. So as you can see, that 10 inches are marking around the blocks. Okay, do the same thing you did before. When we get to the hip line now, we'll reduce it to 8, exactly what we did before. So this part here will be reduced to 8. So all of here is 10, here is 8. At the hem, I'm going to make a mark at 6 inches. Okay, so we're going to come to the edge here, around where we have here 2 inches. Okay, taper it out to the edge where we have 4 inches at that point automatically. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to connect everything. So connecting the 6 to the 8, we're going to now connect the 8 to the 10. Okay, I remember we have a 10 that is following that curve, so that's what I'm doing. I'm joining all the 10s together. Now 10 was the excess that I kept from the edge of the curved side. Okay, so now we connect the 1.5 that we have there straight up to where we marked our 10. When we're done with that, it's time to cut it out exactly the way we did before. So up the 1.5, this side here stays exactly the same. Okay, here we cut the curve from 2 to 4. We're connecting 6 to 8, and now we're going to connect 8 to the 10 inches that we kept in front of the part of the fabric that we slashed and we spread. When we're done, we're simply going to unpin everything. Okay, so here we have the lining and the part that we've draped already. We're simply going to do the same thing that we did before. We'll take the top side, see the same thing we're doing. We're flipping it front side of the lining, facing the front side of the bridal satin, and we're going to sew all the way to that dot. The same thing we did to the other side. Remember, we came from the other side and we met this dot. You see, that's where we stopped. You see that? So the same thing now, we will simply complete it from this side. We'll come from the side. Now if you see, I've made a stitch that have binded it together, so flip it to the front side, and then I'm going to need to join this side here together. Okay, so I'm going to join the side at 1/2 inch. Now as you can see, I have sealed the sides. As you can see, I've sealed the sides. Now the same thing, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to smoothen out the bottom part and the hip area pin. This is the bottom part I'm pinning. Okay, now the next thing, smoothing out the hip area, because you know that the hip area doesn't have any intentional drape, so I've made a pin at that point. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to need to drape the side also. Alright, so I'm draping the sides now. Start from the bust. Okay, start from the bust, make a drape at the bust. Remember that the stitch that came from both sides ended at the dart on that side. Okay, so one side of the drape came from one edge all the way to the other side of, so it crossed one that stopped at the other side, and then that one simply came from the edge all the way to the space that was left. Okay, now I'm simply doing the same thing, simply just draping everything. Make sure that you try to stay true to the image that you're working with. So now that I have pinned this side down, the next thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to take it to the machine is to join the sides together. So if I flip it over, you'll see that here is draped, this is the second side, this is also draped too. We're going to need to run a stitch to join them together. Now the stitch will not touch the lining, okay? It's just you joining together. I will show you guys how I go about it on the machine, but before we get to the machine, we'll need to pin them together. Okay, so you see this part here, make sure here is smooth and make sure here is smooth. Lift it up. You are pinning the two sides of the top part together. The lining is not involved. The hip, the same thing, smoothing out the hip area. Hold the two folds, the ruffles that you have, you see that, secure it in place. Now the pin is coming out at the other side of the ruffles. Okay, do it all the way to the top and get to the machine. Now if you look at what I'm doing closely, you see that I'm trying to align everything. As you sew along, take out the pins that you fixed, but the lining is not involved in this process. Okay, it's just me running a line, joining everything. Remember, when we used our pins to pin, we formed some sort of pleats. So I'm running my line across the pleats, both the one on the large side and the one on the smaller side that we did second. So I'm simply running a line from the top all the way down to the bottom. Make sure that you align everything. Make sure that all the dots, that all the ruffles and the folds that you did are all in place. At the bottom part, around from the hip down, there are no pleats whatsoever, so it's just you joining both sides of everything together. Make sure it is smooth. Make sure that there are no excesses of bulge or any fabric bulging anywhere. When you're done with that, please inspect whatever you have done. Take out every single pin. Don't forget your pins inside so that everybody can be safe. So take out all the pins. So as you can see, this is the line that I ran from the bottom all the way to the top. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open it up. Now the edge that we have here is still rough. If you want, you can use an overlocker or a sega and finish the edges, but in case you don't have access to that, like I do right now, I'm simply going to hem it. Okay, I'm simply folding it twice. Okay, fold it again the second time. As you can see that I folded it twice, and I'm going to sew from the top part all the way down to this part here. That's the stitch I will make, and then as you can see, this is the part I told you to stitch, sorry. And then I've also gone ahead to stitch the curve that went all the way down to the bottom. I've hemmed that too. If you had a sega or an overlocker, this would be a lot more convenient for you. So now the next thing and the last thing to do is to join the front to the back. So here, this is the back that we have, the back zipper. While placing it front side facing the front side. Okay, so this is front side facing front. You're going to come like so. You see this part, you take the lining, okay, front facing front. See this, front facing front. Take the lining, okay, the top part at the top, take the lining and you're wearing it over. So now we're going to join it like that, top to bottom. Make sure you align the sides. Now I kept 1.5 allowance. I'm sewing 1.5 from top to bottom. Now once again, look at this. This is this. I'm taking the lining and wearing it over, sort of wearing it over whatever I am doing. And as I go along, I will make sure that all the sides are the same. If you are following along, you should have 4 parts. Okay, so there will be the 2 better satins and there will be 2 linings. So make sure they are all on the same level and sew down whatever allowance that you kept initially. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, so I planted the front in between the lining and the fabric of the back. Okay, so that's basically what I did. And you're going to stitch this from top to bottom like I am. Make sure you back stitch at the bottom. As you can see, I just stitched from here all the way down to the bottom. What you're going to do is you're going to turn everything inside out. When you turn everything inside out, this is what you should have. Here is clean. So this is the front, this is the back. By the time I flip it over, you'll see here that here too is really clean. The next thing is to seal the other side. Basically the same thing. You take the back, okay, see the back, front side facing front, flip the lining and plant it. You see this? Plant it inside. So I'm sewing from the beginning to the end. See here, place it, use the lining, cover it, stitch them together from beginning to end like we just did. So here you can see I have sealed both sides. Yeah, we're pretty much done. If you've gotten this far, congratulations. Now the last thing I'm about to do is I'm going to hem the bottom part. So I'm going to bend it like so, and I'm going to sew all around, hem it around. Now I'm bending 1/2 inch twice, so as you can see